Welcome to Future Ready Live, where we talk about topics that will help CPAs, CGMAs, and their organizations adapt and thrive in an accelerating, exponentially changing world. I'm your host, Tom Hood, the EVP of Business Engagement and Growth at the AICPA and CIMA, the largest global body of certified professional accountants in the world. Today, we're going to be talking about the finance transformation insights from our Future Finance 2023 Summit. And joining me is Thomas Hood, the Director for SC&H's Group's Enterprise Transformation and Advisory Practice. And yes, he is related. He's my son, or also known as the other Tom Hood. Thomas is a partner at SC&H Group, where he leads the Finance Modernization and Managed Services practice, which provides clients with an ongoing layer of expertise to augment their existing finance teams or provide continuous support to help in their finance transformation efforts. He has a broad range of proficiencies in leading EPM and data analytics solutions across multiple industries, most notably hospitality, consumer brands, manufacturing, and healthcare. With more than 12 years of experience leading organizations through digital transformation efforts, Thomas brings a scalable approach to help his clients meet the demands of a rapidly changing business environment, and more importantly, sustaining those efforts on an ongoing basis. He has been a member of our Future Finance Leadership Advisory Group from the start in 2021 and participated in developing the Finance Assessment Model for Effectiveness, also known as the FAME model, and developed a series of programs titled Modern Finance at the Intersection of Finance and Technology. Thomas, say hello to our audience.
Hello, everyone. And Dad, thanks for finally inviting me to your big LinkedIn Live here.
Well, it's good to have you here. I have to say it is interesting being able to actually work with your son. So it's been great to have you part of this group. So let's start with the Future Finance Summit this year. What were your big takeaways and insights?
So I think, looking back at this summit and the last three summits, I think, things have changed by not changing at all. And what I mean by that is we're seeing the same three or four trends really year over year. That's the acceleration of digital transformation, retaining talent, and then upskilling existing talent to be able to meet the demand of what's being placed on them within the finance organization. I think the one thing that we saw this year is we're starting to see companies take a more disciplined approach to managing transformation. And I think, looking at some of the sessions, Sound Exchange, which we'll talk about later, but Disney and Verizon, we got to see how they were managing transformation and organizations that are massive, right? And how they handle dealing with the change that they're facing in two industries that are, at the forefront of various different disruptions, right? Disney on the COVID front. And so I think that's what we're going to start seeing more come out of this, right? Is you're going to see transformation efforts become more embedded in the discipline within the finance organization. And I think we're going to continue to see that, I think, ultimately to the point where, digital transformation as a trend isn't really a trend anymore. It's part of, right? How long is it going to be a trend until it's just part of the job description? And I know that's been discussed by the FLAG group and other attendees at the conference as well, that this is an ongoing effort that doesn't have a start and an end, right? It's really a means to meet the demands that are being placed, again, either externally or internally, whether it's through, inflationary pressures, acquisitions, divestitures, or needing to, as a finance organization, support business operations internally in a more value-added way than they may have in the past to drive decisions.
Yeah, I think it's funny because I think you've been around this profession since you were born, basically, and we've been talking about this degree of moving up the value chain and adding more value and automating everything for like 20 years.
Right.
And I actually think it's actually here now. I mean, we're finally seeing a whole lot of what we might call autonomous finance. At least the capabilities are starting to become there. I think Gen AI is accelerating that. But to your point, I think you're right. The notion that it's not a trend anymore, I think it's a permanent as we like to say, the waves of transformation have been getting bigger and coming faster. And I think the bottom line is they're not going to ever stop. And that's what you're saying, right? It's just going to be, we got to have to learn how to ride these waves of transformation. It's going to be part of the finance job description. And we're starting to see many of these big companies have leaders who are now titled finance transformation.
Yeah, exactly. And then I think that ties closely into what we're seeing with the trend for the needing to upskill, right? And it's really the digital transformation piece pulling that with then trying to upskill existing resources or add in new types of resources that may not have been traditionally considered part of the finance team.
Yeah. So like, so tell me about what you see in that respect. What are some of those new skills or disciplines that you're talking about? I think some of them you're training on too.
Yeah. I mean, I think, going back to the core of what the tech stack is for accounting and finance, it's really ERP, EPM, and data analytics, right? Those are really the tools that are available to finance teams today. And I think, it starts with having the right skill set within your organization to be able to not only go through a transformation, but then be able to maintain and continuously improve those applications to meet how your business is changing. So, for example, if you have a budgeting and forecasting solution, whether it's OneStream, whether it's Oracle EPM, Adaptive, finance, 10 years ago may have been just kind of more of a consumer of the information in there, but now they're at the forefront of the decisions being made in those solutions, and they are ultimately taking on more and more responsibility to use those solutions to drive how they forecast, how they plan, and then ultimately, right, how they are able to interact with whether it's other opcos or other divisions within the organization to support decision support or other facets there. So from what we're training on, right, obviously the Gen AI thing is out there. Everybody's talking about that. But I think there's kind of a core focus needs to be renewed on the basics and getting those components down, because I do think to some degree AI is going to be baked into these solutions, right? So if you think Oracle's not going to bake something in their EPM, OneStream, Adaptive, and Workday, right, the stuff is going to make its way in. So I think, from my perspective and what we're seeing at our clients, it's really bolstering down the use of those core tools and embedding those into their daily practice. And then also, right, that goes into data analytics and making sure you have truly structured data in your organization to be able to capitalize on these trends coming down. Otherwise, Gen AI it's attaching a rocket ship to a horse and buggy, and it's not gonna, it might not take off.
I hear you. So it's funny because you're covering the other big thing was what happened with our future finance group. I think you were there. We were in person this past, I think, August. And at that point, Gen AI just catapulted on the scene and became the number 2 issue behind digital transformation that everybody was facing. And that held up all the way through the summit and continues to be there. So it's now finance transformation, Gen AI, need for new skills, and finding and retaining talent, right? Those seems to be the top 3. So are now 4 counting Gen AI. But to your point, 2 things I think you made, which I think are significant here. And this is what we've been hearing from the group. It was at our summit when we had a big Gen AI session. We had Gartner come in. 2 things. They're saying, A, make sure you have your data right. Your data house has to be in order if you're going to get any benefit out of any of that. But to your point, all the applications, I mean, most of them we're talking to are already in process or baking in AI in every one of those applications. So you're exactly right. It's going to be in your own core finance applications. What you might need is the productivity piece for personal productivity on your teams, which comes from Copilot, Microsoft's Copilot, or another, Google's, whatever they've got, the Bard. However, those other tools will be your personal productivity in a controlled instance in your organization so that your data doesn't get out to the bigger world. But that's what we're starting to see finance teams using it for internally, is for those extra productivity pieces, reviewing, doing research on the SEC filings or getting the trends down and those kind of things. But you're
Right.
exactly right. The core stuff, finance won't have to be AI experts. It'll be baked into every one of your tools.
Right, exactly. And yeah, to your point, right, ChatGPT, Copilot are great examples where you can start leveraging AI for productivity on
Yeah.
that side of the equation, right? I mean, Microsoft's done a great job with baking that into Copilot, but also into Power BI to where you can start right asking it to create. I need to see year over year comparisons of sales and come up with what was the driving factor in there, and essentially pull your data to create dashboards without having to create them yourself.
Yeah.
But again, that goes to your point. You have to have the data has to be structured in order to do that. So these tools are going to start coming. You're going to start seeing and realizing more benefits of where you can apply AI, but without the foundation, you're going to be left with a pretty big gap to actually achieve it.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. That's pretty. So now let's talk a little bit about, because you were involved from the start on the movement of the finance assessment model for effectiveness, also known as FAME. So talk a little bit about what your experience was with that and kind of what you think that was covering.
Yeah, so I think that's a great tool. I think it's the artist formerly known as FAM, as we refer to it in the flag. So this is a great assessment framework that I think it differentiates itself from some of the other ones out there. Is one, it was developed by people within the industry, right?
Yeah.
So these are other finance leaders and other accounting leaders who sat down to come up with this framework collectively to figure out how do we assess our organization across the 5 key domains: technology, business, strategy, leadership, people. And I think the other interesting piece with that is it is modular. In other words, as a finance team, you can take either all of it or part of it to go through it and focus your attention on certain parts and still get the full value out of it. Whereas I think with most other assessments out there or these framework models, you typically need to go through the entire thing to get some sort of output. And if you're not a public company, for example, and there's pieces about external reporting that may not apply to you, that can skew your results. Whereas in here, I think this is a more tailored model where you can take that to your teams. I think this piece is also kind of important with another trend that was coming out of the Future of Finance Summit, which is the need for a vision that has both weigh-in and buy-in, which at its best is used as a communication tool. I think there's the old quote that you've shared with me that all transformations are linguistic, which is simple on its face, right? But at the end of the day, if you're able to actually communicate what you're trying to transform to is the first part. And then if you're able to use this kind of assessment model to frame out where the gaps are today across your whole team, then you can figure out and be more effective and disciplined, like Disney or Verizon, in reaching your transformation goals.
Yeah. And so 2 things that you emphasize there that are critical is it was created by our group, the Future Finance Leadership Advisory Group, about 50 major corporate CFOs, a couple consultants, just a big group of insiders, if you will. So it was by them, for them, and that's what made them ultimately work with us to create that. And then the second piece I think you just hit on, which gets back to the notion of that language, but creating a vision for where you're trying to go. So the whole thing goes from scorekeeper to futurist, and basically five basically steps, but it lets you start to map out how you would do that across those other core dimensions, which, like you said, you can skip a dimension if it doesn't apply or you don't need to play with it right now, but it gets you at least the way to start getting your people to think about where we're going to move from and to, which is a big part of it, right? Which that also ties to one of your clients who you brought to the summit, who kind of went over their case study that you worked on with them. So talk a little about Mike Levy, who's the VP of Finance at Sound Exchange, and they just happen to be one of Fast Company's most innovative companies last year, a nonprofit of all things that handles royalties for the music industry, right? That's our main business. So
Yeah.
talk a little bit about what you did in the session. What was called Transform to Perform, which was pretty cool.
Yeah, so I think the Sound Exchange story starts again. Mike Levy, who's the VP of Finance, reached out to us to come in and help them navigate, a digital transformation effort that they're undertaking, and we're supporting them with. Again, this started with Mike and Angela, his CFO, having this need to, or they knew that they needed to change and they needed to improve, and they wanted a starting point to figure out how do we get our team on board with where we're going. Again, I think a lot of the research that you've shared at the Future of Finance and that has come out is these transformation efforts. Mindset is a huge component of it, and addressing mindset and having your team bought in to what they're doing is just as important as what it is that you're doing for it to be effective. And so that's where this joint vision engagement that we do with you came into play, where we were able to help the entire Sound Exchange finance team and accounting team come together in a room, get exposed to the external trends that are happening out at the Future of Finance, things that you are seeing, and then boil that down into what's going on within Sound Exchange across people, process, technology, essentially what would be done as part of the FAME assessment, and figure out where are the gaps that each of the team member, and again, this was the whole finance team, everybody was included. So you got to see a pretty unique perspective, synthesized up right from the bottom to the top.
Yeah.
That ultimately helped come to not only what is the vision for Sound Exchange's accounting and finance team, but then also have people understand not only what they need to transform to, but why they need to transform in order to be successful. So Mike did a great job down there presenting on their journey and what's coming next. But ultimately, this initial vision project was used as not only as a communication tool outside of finance, but also inside finance, to have everybody agreeing and talking about the same thing and marching in the same direction, to where, as we went on to the additional roadmap afterwards, you could see people were thinking about things differently, and trying to try to figure out how things can change versus resisting change in their organization.
Yeah, because anytime you start talking finance transformation, invariably the finance team thinks, oh, we're going to get automated here and probably outsourced or something, right? It's a fear, or we'll be left behind. And so having them part of that process changes that mindset. It says, okay, maybe we can do this, and let's get moving on it.
I think so. And I think it's part of the devil you know and the devil you don't know.
Yeah.
Where finance teams might know, all right, this isn't ideal, but we don't want to change because we know what it is. And if we go through this transformation, we're going to have to do two jobs. We're going to have to not only manage all of this change, but we're going to be stuck dealing with what we have.
Yeah.
And I think going through, the vision engagement that we jointly did helps them understand that not only do you need to change right now, but you're going to need to continue to change in order to be effective in your role and as a company.
Yeah. And it gets back to the whole riding the waves thing, right? We have to all learn how to surf, because transformation isn't a one-time thing anymore. And that's been probably true for the last few years, but it's more true now than ever. And I think so here's the other part. Most finance teams, in our experience, don't get out much. In other words, they're not out at major conferences seeing all the trends and all that. They might read some things and all that, but they're not seeing it on that scale. And we basically show, here's this group of 50 major finance leaders and companies everyone recognizes, and they're all dealing with this. Suddenly it goes, oh, we're like all in the same boat. Yeah. So it makes it, I don't know if it's misery loves company, or we just get around like, okay, we're going to figure this out. But I think there's a sense that we're all in this together, which is exactly what we're trying to do as a community, is benefit each other from sharing those stories, whether it's Mike Levy at Sound Exchange or Verizon or Disney, or we've had GSK, we've had a bunch of major companies that have helped share what their journey is, and that lets us all learn ourselves about how we can take these journeys even better in the future. But to your point, having a vision, which almost every one of our companies in the Future Finance Group has a vision for their finance function of the future that they're driving to. And that's one of the big things that we know. It's lined up to the corporate vision, but it's definitely a finance vision that helps get people, connected to what they're trying to do.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the other cool thing about, the future of finance, as you were talking about that group, is the same challenges that are being faced by Disney and Verizon. It's all the way down, right, across industry, across middle market. And then I think that's also compounding some of the trends too, where with cloud computing, you have enterprise solutions coming down that are now available, things like Oracle EPM being bundled with NetSuite, or Adaptive being bundled with Workday, and right. So you're seeing new tools being kind of pushed into different market categories that previously weren't there, which further drives the need and for upskilling your team to be able to manage those solutions.
Yeah, and in fact, I was just on our last Future Finance Group meeting a couple of weeks ago, where they talked about the need to understand the ecosystem better, because it's changing so fast. Right now, there's so many more providers who are now circling the big ERP systems, and the middle market, Sage Intacct, and some of those guys are moving upstream, NetSuite, et cetera, right? So now you've got all this up and down stuff going, and none of them are named based on what they do. So there's all these new names, and people are like, well, what the heck does that do, right? So I think we're going to see that in our next summit, which, by the way, will be in San Diego next December 11th through the 13th, I believe, are the dates. But we'll post it in the show notes as we in this conversation. So let's wrap up here with, so what would your advice be to these finance teams that are getting ready to embark on these transformation journeys?
Oh, I think it's going to be what we just talked through, which is make sure that you have a vision in place to steer this. And again, to clarify, this isn't just we want to be the best finance team and right, everything's great, but a true vision that is built up from within your team based on challenges that you have today, and weighed against the goals of where you collectively want to go tomorrow, to make sure that you're transforming the right pieces of your organization, and that you're marching in the right direction to have the mindset piece kind of squared away and in place behind you.
Yeah.
I think, and just again, seeing that starting to come out of Disney and Verizon, I think they both had strong visions for their team. And again, more importantly, had the buy-in piece from the team. So it's not pushed down, but rather it is truly a collaborative view of where the organization needs to go across people, process, and technology.
Yeah. And then I like to say that it's the best research we ever did that nobody read, which is that white paper called Finance Transformation, that talks that to your point, 39% of all transformation success is mindset alone. And the priority is mindset, skill set, and then tool set. And so mindset and skill set, which is upskilling, is about 89%. And obviously some of that's focused on data analytics, some of it's focused on collaboration, but that combination is what gets you the success, even over the best tools in the market you can get. So what a great conversation, great way to end this conversation. And I'm glad you got on the Future Ready Live finally. So this is thank you for joining me, and don't miss other Future Ready Live sessions back here on LinkedIn the first and third Tuesday of each month at noon Eastern, and we'll see you then. Thank you very much.
Thank you.